three. And goal!
Bearcat Blitz. Glad to have everybody in with us on this second show of the week, getting into a Dayton preview, plus the kind of latest look at the transfer portal for Cincinnati football. We're winding down week 2 of the transfer portal timeline. We'll get to all of I think they've added 7 or 8 guys so far from the transfer portal to the mix, and top 20 class of transfers so far, according to 24/7 Sports. We'll dive into that in the beginning part of the show and then preview the first top 25 matchup of the season for Cincinnati and the first top 25 matchup in over 20 years in one of the more highly played contests between a Cincinnati Bearcats opponent and Cincinnati. Dayton, number 22 Dayton, coming to town to take on Cincinnati at Heritage Bank Arena. Cannot wait for that one. Honestly, I don't know. I might be just as excited for this one as I was for Xavier. Maybe a tad less excited because I love watching the crosstown shootout at Fifth Third Arena specifically, and I would be just as excited if this game was a home-and-home series at UD Arena and at Fifth Third Arena as opposed to being at a neutral site, Heritage Bank Arena, but we'll get to all that when we touch on the preview in the back half of the show. Before that, though, I'll tell you about Bet Online. It continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to end-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC, head to Bet Online today and don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your welcome bonus on that first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. Take a quick break, and then we'll get into that transfer portal update. All of the names added so far, plus a preview of Dayton. Can Cincinnati keep its winning ways going and get its 10th victory of the 2024 season? All that coming up on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, looking at the transfer portal so far for UC football, it's been a pretty successful portal thus far from Cincinnati. They rank 20th on 24/7 Sports overall team rankings nationally. I believe among Big 12 teams, you got Texas Tech at number 1 on that ranking, and then Houston at 10, Colorado at 11, looking at Kansas at 15, and then Cincinnati right there in the top 5 among transfer portal classes so far at number 20. They have not added a projected 4-star or higher recruit or commit in the transfer portal, according to 24/7 Sports, but they've added a lot of solid talent from the portal at that. When you think about Jalen White-McLean, Matthew McDoom, Nolan Latalipe, I'm going to have to figure out the pronunciation of that one, as I expect Nolan will be maybe a starting presence, if not a depth piece present on that offensive line for Cincinnati. Jeff Caldwell, the 4th edition, Cyrus Allen, the 5th edition, Caleb Goody, the 6th edition, Steven Rusnick, the 7th edition, the new kicker for Cincinnati. And the biggest news I would say over the past few days is the fact that Rusnick chose Cincinnati over so many other offers, a guy who was perfect kicking the football from the field this season, 11 for 11 on field goals, did not miss an extra point as well, and was top 35 nationally in touchback percentage compared to Nathan Hawks, who was second to last among qualified kickers in touchback percentage in 2024. So they got that locked in as well, Neil, and Taron Tayo, who we mentioned earlier in the week as the first commitment of the cycle. I'm a big fan of what they've done so far in the portal, Neil. You and I touched on this as being such an important time on the calendar for Cincinnati football, for Zach Grant, the general manager there, and the rest of his recruiting staff, his talent acquisition staff. So far, they're taking strong advantage of this finite time they have to add experienced talent.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Russ. And I think
obviously we've talked about it all offseason, and we heard from Scott Satterfield that there was some positions of need that they were really going to attack, and they have done that so far. Wide receiver was one of them. You get Cyrus Allen to flip from Tulane to Cincinnati after starring at Texas Tech over the last few seasons, or after last year he started at Louisiana Tech, but that's a big time ad right there too, especially with Caleb Goody on the outside. You get your two wide receivers, and then you bring in a guy like Jeff Caldwell, who is also another 1,000+ yard receiver, who is one of the most dynamic receivers in the transfer portal.
Another separator.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And I think that separates what they are doing there in the transfer portal, because you look down and you see the wide receiver room now. Jeff Caldwell, for people who aren't familiar with him, he is a big-time target, 6'5", 200 pounds, a real nice junior season, 52 receptions, 1,011 yards, 10 touchdowns, averaging nearly 20 yards per catch. That's a big-time playmaker, and anytime you can add that kind of size on the outside is something you need, especially for Cincinnati, because their tallest wide receiver, Russ, last season was what? Evan Prater at 6'2", 6'3", alongside Xavier Henderson. So overall, anytime you can add those big-time wide receivers there, the big guys with size on the outside, that's going to be huge. But a guy who's also very quick. Caleb Goody has also hit 21.5 miles an hour throughout his college career. So this is a big-time offseason for Scott Satterfield and the Bearcats as well. And then we talk about the offensive line, Russ. We mentioned Tyron Teo from Ball State. That's a big-time addition as well. And then you get Albany transfer Nolan Latulip from.
We're gonna have to learn the Cajun pronunciation on that one. I'm guessing it's French. I think it looks French to me. Latulip. That's got to be French.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to learn the pronunciation on that one. But Russ, that's a big time addition too for people who don't know, because you just look at the size. 6'8", 295 pounds. I'm positive that with one offseason from where he comes in January to springtime, Russ, it's going to be safe to say we're probably looking at Latulip being close to 315 pounds under Nico Palazetti's weight and conditioning staff. Would you say so?
We'll see. Yeah, I could. I mean, he's definitely going to put on weight. He's going to get
definitely going to put on
like close to 300. I don't know. I mean, that would be what, 27 pounds in one off season. I mean, it's definitely possible. I don't know if it's healthy to do that, but
he's 295 right now. I bet you.
295. Yeah, for sure. Then I could see him in the 300, 310-ish range. I think 310, because you want to find that right medium of a maximum power, but still maintaining the agility with that maximum power.
Yeah, and on top of it, Latulip brings quality, and I mean quality experience. Started 27 games over the last 2 years. That's huge. Anytime you can have quality experience, especially in the Big 12 and up front on the offensive line, is huge. He was a freshman All-American for the FCS level as well, so that's a big-time addition. So overall, those are two big-time additions up front in the trenches. Now, it's still going to be interesting to see what they might do and attack the portal. We mentioned Matthew McDoom earlier this week. We mentioned a couple others, but on top of it, I'm really liking what they have done in the transfer portal right now, especially getting Jalen White, McClain as well. I think that's a big-time addition. And then Steven Rusnak. I mean, Russ, this was a guy who had options just about anywhere, probably in the transfer portal. That kicker had offers from Missouri, Houston, Texas Tech, Pitt, just to name some of them. But 11-11 on field goals, as you mentioned, 25 for extra point attempts last season. And that was something Cincinnati definitely struggled in this past season, because, Russ, you think about the kicking game last year, one game that stands out to mind, Texas Tech. Obviously, there was a lot of things that came about that made that final kick weary and difficult. But the kicking game struggled for Cincinnati. And if there was a time where they could have maybe hit a couple of those kicks, things might have trended differently. So overall, you get a big-time kicker in the portal, and that was something that Scott Satterfield came out right away and said they were going to do. Carter Brown hits the portal, Hawks out of eligibility. They didn't have a kicker, so big time that they go get one, especially one after you get a guy that visits North Carolina right after they hire Bill Belichick. So anytime you can steal that one, that's a pretty good thing you're doing in Clifton.
Yeah, held offers from Missouri and Texas Tech. Touched on him a little bit when we were running down the additions in recent days. It was so needed, Neil. So needed. I mean, the kicking game was straight up awful last season. It was awful. After Nathan Hawks had his nice day against Miami, it was just a disaster. 83rd nationally in overall field goal percentage, 72% on the year, just not even close to good enough, 72.7%. And as I mentioned, Nathan Hawks was second last among qualified kickers in touchback percentage. Just unacceptable. It has to be way better, has to be much better at a program like Cincinnati, and Steven Rusnick is ready to come in and get it to a good to maybe elite level, Neil. And if you have an elite field goal kicker in this league, it's like having an elite field goal kicker in the AFC North. It's such a nip and tuck type of atmosphere, game to game, week to week. You have to be able to rely on that extra forgotten phase of special teams each and every Saturday. And Cincinnati will now be able to rely on that kicking game a lot more. We touched on, who was it? There was one of the players they added as a strong special teams returner as well. So he should help them. Yeah, Matthew McDoom has returned kicks, I think back in his freshman year or sophomore year. He's got experience returning kicks. So hopefully they can get a bigger boost in that sense and find someone that can get through a crease and turn a kickoff return into a 35, 40-plus yard gain and set that offense up with some shorter fields more consistently coming off of kickoffs. Steven Rusnick, though, on the other side with his foot, should be a huge addition for Cincinnati. And as I mentioned, they outworked teams like Missouri, Texas Tech, a Texas Tech team that is number one in 24/7 sports transfer portal rankings right now. Rusnick 3 for 3 from 50-plus yards, 25 for 25 on extra points. He was fantastic after transferring to Charlotte from Michigan State, out of the power conference, into the group of five, out of the group of five, into a power conference role once again. Overall, Neil, I think I've really enjoyed what they've done. Looking at the positions they've added so far, maybe one more receiver, possibly we could see. I think you're probably pretty strong at that position right now, though, Neil. When you think about Cyrus Allen, Jeff Caldwell, Tony Johnson being your seniors, Caleb Godey, Barry Jackson being your sophomore and juniors, and then Cale Woodburn, Dakari Anderson, Elijah Jones coming into their redshirt freshman season. Hopefully, maybe see some bulking up from Cale Woodburn. He can maybe get into the mix. Barry Jackson, you wonder if he can get into the mix more this season. Maybe one more receiver addition, but they're pretty strong on that front and adding 3 certified guys that can separate and hit the afterburners at a higher rate than Cincinnati's had in years past. Looking at spots that probably need to address the most going forward, Neil, to me, it's probably interior offensive line that you would maybe want to address moving forward, or tight ends the most. Probably tight end number 1, adding one more guy to go with Joe Royer and Gavin Grover at that position, I think would be very, very smart, just given how much kind of taxing can go into the tight end role, how much dinging up can happen there. You want to have enough depth in that sense in that room. But overall, Neil, I feel like they've filled their holes pretty succinctly so far, outside of maybe one more tight end and maybe one more kind of deep breath release depth piece on the offensive line. It's hard to tell what that group's going to look like right now. Know that you're going to have Gavin Gerhardt at center. Probably going to have DeAndre Buford at right guard or right tackle, depending on how that battle breaks out between him, Ethan Green, and Xavier Lozowicki. And then a mixture of Jake Wheelock, Evan Tangastal. There's a lot of other spots that are up in the air on that offensive line, Neil, and there's some guys that have experience that are going to be going for it, but there's not a lot of experience on that offense.
Also worth noting,
Tarantayo and Ludalipe.
On the offensive line aspect, it's worth noting that John Williams has another year of eligibility if he wants it, and then you still have Philip Wilder on the tackle position as well, who has another year of eligibility. So expect to see Wilder back. Nobody knows what to see with John Williams yet, whether if he goes to the NFL or he wants to come back and build that draft stock for one more year. Still something to keep an eye on up front as well. But Gavin Gerhardt coming back is a huge piece. But expect Evan Tangenstall to step in and be one of those guys. Xavier Lozowicki as well. It's going to be interesting to see what they do there on the offensive line, Russ, to say the least.
Very interesting. We'll keep you covered on that next week. I'm sure there will be some more additions to the Cincinnati Transfer Portal Haul. But so far, strong haul. Strong haul. They're doing what we said they had to do to kind of instill some more confidence, some more hope going into the 2025 season. I think they're doing that strongly so far on the football front. There's plenty of hope to be had on the basketball front, and they can get a lot more hopeful with a win Friday night in their first ranked matchup of the season for Wes Miller's basketball crew. previewing that coming up on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, Dayton coming to town on Friday night, and what I expect to be, we don't have the betting line as of right now, a 4 to 5 point favoring on the edge of Cincinnati in this game. They're roughly a 70 to 72% favorite on ESPN's matchup predictor to get the win here as of this recording in what is a tightly contested matchup. And when I wrote my preview yesterday, UC was 24th on KenPom, and Dayton was 31st. 13th in adjusted offensive efficiency as of yesterday, and Cincinnati was 10th in adjusted defensive efficiency. So a rock and a hard place for this matchup to traverse through. And it's a very common opponent for Cincinnati. Dayton has played Cincinnati, or Cincinnati's played Dayton the 6th most times of any opponent since the 1949-50 season, and they're trying to move to 45-17 all time against Dayton. Starting on the offensive side of the ball, when Cincinnati has the basketball, Neil, what are you looking for?
Yeah, for Cincinnati, what I'm looking for on the offensive side of the ball is obviously to shoot better than what they did versus Xavier the other night. That's going to be the number one thing. Can't shoot 32% versus this Dayton team, especially in a neutral environment, neutral site matchup, especially in an environment where Dayton fans are probably going to do what they did last year and take over Heritage Bank Arena. So on top of it, Cincinnati just has to play smart. I would like to see them get downhill and attack. That's something that they should have done earlier versus Xavier and probably could have opened that game up a little bit more than the 68-65 final score. But I think this is going to be a game where if you can get downhill, Jizzle James is going to be the impact player for this one, Russ, on the offensive end, especially going 0 for 11 versus Xavier. I mean, you heard Wes Miller say it yesterday that they watched every possession together that James played versus Xavier. The two of them, Wes Miller and Jizzle James, sat down together. Guys, don't expect Jizzle James to ever go 0 for 11 in a college game again. So I'm looking forward to that. But Cincinnati just playing to their strength. Take care of the ball. This is going to be a Dayton team that is led by a veteran backcourt. They know how to pressure the ball. But Cincinnati takes care of the ball on their end. It should be a fun time. But you got to find ways to get downhill and attack. I think if they can find a way to get Zed Key into foul trouble and Amali Liang, I think is how you pronounce it, they can find ways to get downhill and attack and make Dayton play small, I think they'll be in good hands. But on top of it, you got to find ways to attack and get downhill.
I'm with you, and just avoiding those pesky steals from this guard unit, man. And on the offensive end, Jizzle James, huge game for him coming up on Friday night. Can he and the rest of Cincinnati's point of attack ball handlers, mostly Jizzle James, he's the lead point guard, along with Day Thomas, Seamus Lukosius, Connor Hickman, other guys getting on the ball. But obviously, you know what I'm saying when we're talking about lead ball handlers. Jizzle James takes the case there, and he's been very good this season taking care of the basketball. You see, only turned the ball over 9.56 times per game. That was 17th nationally as of yesterday, and it's very difficult to break through this Dayton defense, but Jizzle James is going to have to figure it out, especially that guard play. 5 steals forced per game by Dayton. That's 17th nationally. A lot of that's done by Enoch Cheeks, 1.8 steals per game. He's one of the best defensive guards in the country and leads the team in steals, as I mentioned, and defensive rating. Can Jizzle James keep his strong 5.1 to 1.8 assist to turnover ratio going, be able to cut through the paint, and as you mentioned, Neil, get to the rim, and ensuingly getting to the rim, get to the foul line. In Dayton's losses this year, Neil, what have teams been doing? Peppering them with free throws. Teams UNC and Iowa State at the Maui Invitational, Dayton's only 2 losses. Those teams shot a combined 63 free throws at an 80% plus clip. Cincinnati likely needs to carry over the really strong, uncharacteristic, given what we've seen from them throughout most of the season before the Xavier game, free throw shooting they had on Saturday when they shoot 79% on 20 plus attempts. That's got to be carried over into a new environment on Friday night. And we'll see if they can do it. Got to be aggressive, get to the rim, don't settle for jump shots, and get this Dayton lineup that's a little bit, can be thin if you get them in the foul trouble, get them feeling some of that pressure. Defensive side of the ball, Neil, what do you got?
Yeah, obviously, this is for defense side of the ball. I think this is a game where Aziz Bandaogo, Dylan Mitchell, AP, those three guys could make a huge impact. Dan Skillings as well. I mean, Dan Skillings did a fantastic job running around on Ryan Conwell versus Xavier. I would look to see another elite defensive performance from Dan Skillings again. Somebody's going to have to step up and take away Nate Santos. If they can take away Nate Santos for Xavier, it's going to make their life a lot easier, especially when Wes Miller called him one of the best forwards in all of college basketball, Russ. This is a guy who's shooting 45% from behind the arc. They can find a way to stop that. It's going to be interesting. You stop Nate Santos, you stop Zed Key, and Zed Key bullied UC and Maui back in 2022. So it's going to be
with the Buckeyes, right?
Buckeyes, yeah. Finished with 19-11 and Ohio State's win over UC. This is a guy, Russ, he's a big force for what they do on the offensive side of the ball. And anytime, if you can get him into foul trouble, it could alter some things as well. Find ways to get the bigs in foul trouble for them. But Zed Key averaging 12 points a game, 66% field goal shooter, lives in the mid-range game, has not attempted anything outside of 16, 15, 18 foot all season. It's going to be interesting. Cincinnati is probably the biggest team that Dayton has faced in terms of length, physicality, and size. It's going to be interesting to see how does Dylan Mitchell, Aziz Bandaogo, Dan Skillings, Simas Lukosius really step to the occasion and find ways to take him away there as well. So, I mean, overall, you got to find a way to take those two guys away. If Cincinnati can take not just one, but both of those guys away, this should be a game where they could run away with it, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy because Dayton, Russ, you and I have saw it. We saw it versus Marquette over the weekend. They can score in volume, to say the least. 4 guys averaging double figures. Cincinnati's got to be on their P's and Q's on the defensive end in order to win this one come Friday night.
What do you got, Neil, for a prediction?
I got 82-78 in favor of the Bearcats.
All righty. Defensively for me, Dylan Mitchell. Can Dylan Mitchell show Dayton a level of athleticism and length, as Neil succinctly just set me up for right there, that Dayton has not seen all season long? Cincinnati's biggest advantage defensively has been and will likely continue to be throughout the season their length, their ability to switch, their ability to close down passing lanes quickly and just disrupt actions and disrupt this offense that thrives, Neil, thrives on its passing. I believe they're one of the top 40 teams in the country in total assists per game. 17.5 assists per game. That's 31st nationally. They got Malachi Smith leading the point of attack there. 5.9 assists per game, 11.1 points. Javon Bennett, 2.6 assists at that. And Cheeks as well has been solid and dishing the ball out with reckless abandon. So all of those guys can create. All of them can mix it in the middle. How will UC shut down those passing lanes? And if they're able to force turnovers, force deflections, get out and run, and force this Dayton team that likes to slow down the clock. As I pull up the stat here, I'll get it in just a moment. Dayton very, very willing to let that clock bleed and take you down to the last 5 seconds of it. 307th nationally in adjusted tempo this season on KenPom. UC has been forced to play that way, I feel like, Neil, more often than it wants to. And dictating that type of game, dictating a faster paced game, will lend itself to the benefit of Cincinnati. I think they get the job done as well. I'm going a little bit more lower scoring here. I think those rims will be a little tight at Heritage Bank Arena on Friday night. Give me the Bearcats 72-69 in another tight one-possession battle right to the end. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Eltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. Transfer portal still going strong. We'll get you covered with all the latest on that front Monday. And then 2 games to discuss. A rare 2 games in a 48-hour span, 56-hour span for the Bearcats, as they have Dayton Friday and Grambling on Sunday. Recap both of those on the next Bearcat Blitz right here on the Believe Network, presented by Bet Online.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a 3.